Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Business Paper Review with me, Kalu Aja. So we're going to get into it real quick, just to give you guys the business news to start your morning wherever you are. So lots of stories today. So let's get kicking. The first story today is from the Daily Trust newspapers, right? The headline reads, over 2 million small and medium enterprises collapsed in 2 years. That's from Smeden. Smeden is the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria. So they basically do surveys, right? The last survey they did in 2017, or their census in 2017, they reported, give or take, about 41 million small businesses registered in Nigeria. So 41 million. They did the same survey, I believe this was 2 years later, and they could only find 39 million SMEs. So between 2017 and 2021, we lost, give or take, about 2 million registered small and medium enterprises. Honestly, I'm surprised it's just 2 million. I'm surprised, really. But these are the registered guys that have completely dropped off Smeden's radar. And it just shows you the enormous pressure, really, that the small businesses in Nigeria are essentially going through. They are under a lot of pressure. And I think this next headline really highlights that pressure that the small and medium enterprises are going through. So our next headline is from this day. It's the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Long headline. They're essentially saying LCCI raises the alarm on impending stagflation, job losses amid declining productivity. So stagflation is essentially when your economy is receding. So you have a recession, but you also have high inflation. So when you combine those two, you get the stagflation. So Nigeria is already having high inflation. So what they're essentially saying is that if we then go into a recession, then we'll technically be in a stagflation, which is not good at all. So I mean, they go through what's going on. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce has expressed concern over the economy of Nigeria, more or less, right? And they are very, very specific. Inflation, weak revenue generation, degenerated infrastructure, forex challenges, high cost profile, right? Even the subsidy payments, the DG of the LCI, Dr. Chinyere Alomona, basically is highlighting all these concerns to the government and saying, listen, guys, we have to take charge of all this, right? She's talking about critical sectors in the economy like agriculture, manufacturing, export financing. The government has got to really focus on those guys. Remember when we talked about the GDP, I think that was last week, we said that the GDP report, if you look at it critically, the large sectors that basically employ a lot of Nigerians are not growing. So when you see agriculture, very, very flat growth at 1.2%, right? So manufacturing flat at 3%. These are where the guys are employed. The parts that are growing don't really employ a lot of people, like entertainment, transportation, small contributions, but huge growth. And that's the problem Nigeria is having with its GDP numbers. So LCCI is essentially saying, hey, government, we've got to really get a handle on all these. And they're also calling out the crude oil theft. They're saying, hey, crude oil theft is cutting away payment to the government. The government has got to borrow, and this is all tied in to why because costs are just simply too much for the organized private sector to cope with. So they're saying government really has to go at this. They mentioned this particular point. We always talk about diversification, but it doesn't mean we abandon oil, right? It means we do more outside oil. But crude oil has a very, very negative growth. They highlight it here, 9 consecutive quarters of negative growth for crude oil, down 11% in this current GDP report. So that's not good. For an oil-producing nation like Nigeria, right, to have 9 consecutive negative growths in that sector. We can do better there, and I think we should do better there. So we've got the story from Smedan saying that SMEs are closed. That is now being corroborated, by the story from LCCI talking about essentially that, hey, manufacturers are really, really, really under the caution that the government really, really has to step up. And I mean, the next story is almost the same thing. It's just different angles of the same story of the hard economy, right? We have this from the Punch. Insecurity, FX crisis cuts capital inflows by 23%. So essentially, we talked about this a bit yesterday, where the capital importation is measured, and it just shows how much money is coming to Nigeria for investments. But it also breaks down that investment. So you've got what we call the FDI, the foreign direct investments. You've also got what's called the FPI, foreign portfolio. So when a company sets up a plant, when Nestle puts a plant in Ogun State, that's foreign direct investment. That's longer, that's more stable, right? FPI means I'm buying stocks in Nigeria, or I'm buying a bond in Nigeria. I send money, I invest in stocks and bonds. We normally try to call those kind of investments hot money. It can come in, it can go out. So countries like the FDI because it's more long term, right? FPI, which is the portfolio, that can come in and go out. So, I mean, the first headline here is that it's down. The total amount of funds that are coming to Nigeria are down. I believe the last quarter, 3.9 billion came in the last quarter of 2021. But right now, we're about 3.1 billion. So 3.9, 3.1, about 810 million decline in foreign investments. And what they've done good here, the point is that they broke down where that decline has really come from. They are saying that the FDI, the FDI side, the tax credits, and also the capital inflow. So the bulk of the money is really going to FPI. So foreigners are attracted by Nigeria's stock market. Remember that it's doing very, very well right now. It's about fourth in the world in terms of returns. So foreigners are investing in the Nigerian capital market. So you are seeing the capital, the foreign portfolio side expand. But FDI is less than 10% really of the foreign inflow. So it's a good and it's good, but it's also something to watch that yes, people are looking at Nigeria, they like the stock market, but they're not really investing long term. They are investing for yield. And once they get that yield, they might leave. So I would say middle of the road story there. Good thing that our stock market is attracting investors, but again, the investors that are coming are not putting in money for the longer term. It's more like foreign portfolio guys targeting the stock market. FDI is not really doing a lot there. So I would say we can work on that and we can get some good results there. Then this is a story from this day. It's Akabueze. Akabueze is the budget office head, right? He said the federal government may rework the medium-term expenditure framework over the suspension of the 5% telecom tax. Guys, we talked about it yesterday, right? Where you had the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Communication both saying that this 5% telecom tax, Minister of Finance says it's approved by Buhari, Minister of Telecommunications says no, it's out of the budget. This is Minister of Finance says, hey, we wrote to you, yeah, this was approved. Communication guy says, hey, it's out. I can't burden my operator, so it's out. And Akabueze, who is more like the budget guy, the guy that does the planning, is saying, well, if that is what's going on, we have to go back and redo the entire medium-term framework because we are plugged in this 5% as funding for the budget. So very important. And again, yesterday we made the point that we can't have this, right? You can't just wake up and say a tax that has been approved and has gone into the medium term, but this is a 3-year framework. The MTEF is a 3-year framework. You just can't wake up and say, oh, it's out. You just don't do that, right? That's why you have time to negotiate and plan this out completely before you put it in. And once it's in, then you just can't take it out. So imagine if you are MTN or an investor, are you going to pay 5% tax? Are you not going to pay 5% tax? It's a lot of money. It's not a rounding error. So again, this goes back to the point. It's not really that it's in or out, but that it shows the lack of coordination at the very, very, very high levels of governance in Nigeria to do with taking decisions on major issues. We saw it with SEPLAT, we're seeing it with this tax. This is not good. So I just hope that we get our act together. If it's going to be in or going to be out, investors want to know and have a sense of what's going to happen. They don't like uncertainty. That's the thing. Investors do not like uncertainty. If it's going to be there, they plan for it, and then they can essentially get around to paying or whatever, right? All right, guys, so let's move on to the next story. This is from the This Day. It says, this is a very, very interesting story. So it starts off very innocuous. It says, the House Committee grills Accountant General over failure to provide evidence of 25% of 6 billion generated by SEC. So let me give you the background. According to Nigerian law, if you are an MDA, that's a ministry, department, or agency, you must remit 25%, like minimum, of what you generate internally back to the government, back to that TSA, Treasury Single Account. So if you are SEC or whoever you are and you generate income, you have to remit the money back, and then you can then apply for the money to pay yourself. So what's happening here? This headline is essentially saying that SEC generated about 6 billion, and the accountant general was not able to provide evidence that this money, the 25%, has been remitted to the federal government. Note, he's not saying there's fraud. He just didn't have the records with him. So the National Assembly guys are saying, look, why didn't you have the records? SEC was on a program today. You should have had the records. And the guy said he didn't have it, but I have my laptop, blah, blah, blah. Again, guys, this goes back to the point we're making. This is SEC, this is the House Committee, this is the Accountant General's office. You can't say you don't have that figure, right? You have to have that figure. At least say you don't have the paperwork to back up the figures, but you have to know that this is there. How did the NAS guys know about this? You are the Accountant General. So it just doesn't leave a lot of confidence, in the Accountant General. Imagine your accountant telling you that, oh, I didn't bring that slip today, or I didn't bring that receipt today. It's these things. It's a narrative being made that we don't know what we're doing. That's the thing. So I don't like it going back and forth. The accountant general should be the one saying, we have the information, this is what it is. They should be the SI unit, not the National Assembly going back and forth with them. But this is where the story gets interesting, right? So there's this, let me get the name right. There's this agency, is the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the FCCPC. I know these guys because we did some work with them when we're trying to sort out the loan shark in Nigeria. These guys basically oversee all that, like they were former competition commission, right? The Consumer Protection Commission, that was their former name, I believe. So they oversee all that. So I know these guys they are pretty okay, but they are essentially saying these guys made 7.6 billion, 7.6 billion IGR. They only remitted 2.6 billion. And this is from January 2021 till July 2020. So the whole year, January till July, they spent, give or take, about 5 billion. So the NAS is saying, how come you guys spent 5 billion? They said, oh, it's for internal operations, blah, blah, blah. And NAS said, well, that is wrong. You can't spend because only the National Assembly can authorize you to spend. The law says when you generate, you have to send the money back to National Assembly or back to TSA. Then National Assembly will then appropriate. They are right. Yes, they are right. You can't spend because no one can spend money unless it's appropriated. I make this point all the time to Nigerians. Nobody can spend money unless NAS, even though they are rubber stamp, unless they appropriate, right? So the story now continues that they start to go back and forth. And then Mr. Feleke, that's Honorable Feleke, I think he's a House of Reps guy. He then says that the accountant of this commission, let me get a name, it's a very long name, of the FCCPC should be removed from the office of the Director of Finance and Administration. He actually wants them to give me a handwritten letter. He will sign it, and that the head director of finance should be removed from office. He then says that there will be no more funds released to the agency until the guy's name is Mr. Akinyobon Ojo, Mr. Ojo. Unless Mr. Ojo is removed, NAS will not give them any money. And if they remove the guy, then they can come back and get money from the federal government. So interesting back and forth, but it reveals what's really going on. You'll be hard pressed to find agencies in Nigeria that remit money back to the federal government. And this is the one area that I think the president, the National Assembly, everyone should really focus on. Who authorized you to spend 5 billion? I mean, they can say, yes, we did this or did that, but then these guys are just a tip of the iceberg. If you go right round, I watched a clip on TV. One guy was saying they spent 2 billion or what? It will be travel, it will be extra code, it will be this, it will be computer. They might buy a computer program for 10 billion or something like that. That's why you have a budget process. If you want to do stuff, present your budget and say, we want to spend this. If your budget is approved and you are spending from the IGR in line with your budget, you can make the argument that, listen, we're in a hurry, we want to spend from our budget, but not when you are spending 5 billion. Did your budget say you spent 5 billion? I don't know, man, but it just looks like this MDA guys just spend the money. The revenue does not go back to the federal government, and the federal government has to go borrow. So it defeats the entire process of the treasury single account, where you have MDAs just deciding we're going to retain money and we're going to spend. I don't think it's right, and I think this is a bit it shows what's happening there. In a way, I support the NAS, whatever you might call them, this is their job. Both the accountant general and that agency, which is just a proxy on all agencies, they haven't done a good job, and they can do a better job in managing internally generated revenues. It's a bit crazy, but they have to do a better job on that. All right, guys, I thought we should try to maybe end with a feel-good story, because I've been making a lot of doomsday stories, right? So this is from The Punch. It says Nigeria leads as Google supports 60 African startups. So if you guys remember, I think it was a year or two, Google was saying, hey, we have this fund we're going to dedicate to just growing the IT and the startup scene in Africa. So now Google has selected about 60 African startups in the second cohort of the Google for Startups Black Founders Fund for Africa. So they have this fund, it's the Black Founders Fund for Africa. In the second cohort, they've selected 60 companies or 60 firms. Nigeria is leading with about 23 out of those selected nations. I think Kenya also has 12, Rwanda has 6, South Africa has 5, Uganda has 4, but Nigeria has 23. I mean, it just tells you what a president or a serious administrator can do with the Nigerian youth. If you unleash the Nigerian youth, you give them power supply, you give them the infrastructure and the support. Those guys will take over the world. We can create a brand new, quote unquote, India, Tata, Infosys software exporting powerhouse from Nigeria. And I read a report, it was IFC Google. They said the largest number of developers in Africa are in South Africa, the second place in Nigeria. But the key about Nigeria was that half of the Nigerian developers were self-taught. They didn't go to university. They essentially taught themselves how to code at home on their own. They didn't go to university. Imagine, let me plug in this. Imagine you turn that Ajaokuta Steel Complex to the largest engineering school in Africa. You put Starlink, you make it high-speed internet. It's already got accommodation, it's got space, it's got power generation. You bring in students, 100,000 students there. You divide them into cohorts and you just unleash them. Okay, we're going to form 4 of you. 4 of you take 1 million. 4 of you take 1 million. You have 2 years. 2 years, internet, free accommodation, 1 million. After 2 years, if you can make it, you go. If you make it, government to buy 25% equity in your firm. Go and look for other founders. If you can't make it, you shift, more other people come. 100,000 every year. How much is it? 100,000 times 1. How much is it? It's not up to the amount used to fuel the presidential plane. But you bring 100,000 Nigerians, you mix in some Kenyans, some Somalis, some South Africans into that Ajaokuta, convert it to one large venture capital university. People are just coming there, working, developing, collaborating. The banks are there, the government is giving, they have power, they have everything in Ajaokuta. You turn that place into a bastion of learning, right? You sit them with funds, you own 25%. If they leave, you own 25%. They can sell, you can put that 25% into a fund that would eventually then grow. You can do your IPO and Nigeria gets paid. Win, win, win for everyone. This is Google. Nigerians are winning. They're going to get 50 grand. Each guy's going to get 50 grand of this. $50,000. Nigeria can do this. Those kids don't want much. They want laptop, internet, safety, and just maybe a place they can go and eat. That's it. They don't want anything more. So Nigeria has really got to look beyond this oil, this diversification. It's not to go to farm, There are other things we can use to grab and employ people, and you create an ecosystem where there is employment, there's wealth generation, and there is hope. Hope for these kids, man. All right, guys, that's the end of our paper review today. Wow, 121. We spent 21 minutes. We'll try to do this in 15 minutes. Any questions? I don't see any questions, guys. All right. If there are no questions, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening. You guys.